to share with you a little bit about where I work with Amanda, and soon to be Minister Bryce is going to be there too, at Advent Health. And the reason being is it's truly an organization that celebrates the whole person, and that's the mind, the body, and the spirit. Which when I heard about this event today, I knew that I was supposed to come, because that's exactly what I'm part of when I work, but also who I am as a mom, as a friend, as an individual. And I had a whole PowerPoint, everything prepared, but as I'm here and I'm just seeing you women and I'm led by the Spirit, I feel that I just want to be real with you.
Amen.
And just be vulnerable with you. And I said to my friend Amanda, you might be hearing some stuff about me that you didn't know before, but I know that I'm loved, and I know, you know, that she truly is somebody who loves me and cares for me, and actually had told me about this event. I think we actually can stay with this slide on, because it talks to you exactly about this is what we promote at Advent Health. And as I'm rounding, because that's what we do at the hospital, we get to round. It's not like Grey's Anatomy. But we focus a lot on obviously the mental health. We've got emotion regulation, self-awareness, managing stressors, empowerment, but you have to have balance. So if one of these things is out of order, physical health, which we'll be able to hear about today as well, safety, physical safety, medical awareness, nutrition, and obviously the spiritual health. We do value all beliefs in religions at Advent Health when we are ministering to team members and to also the patients. But at our core, at my core, Jesus is the only way.
Amen.
Right? So it's a sense of purpose, because he gives us that. Spiritual traditions, connection to community, and compassion. So I kind of want to take you back a little bit about why I do what I do in mental health. As a young child, I grew up in a great family. There was nothing that happened to me so tragic as a young girl, except for that little thing when you're a little different, and you have a soft heart, and you want to make sure that people are cared for. You kind of get picked on and bullied a little bit. So as a young child, I did, and I didn't realize it then, but I now know as well, is that I tried to cover myself and be hidden. So I would overeat, I would cope that way. I was the teacher's pet. I focused on my education, but as a young kid, that doesn't quite fit in with everybody being the cool kids on the block. So I got teased and picked on. I reverted into myself. I was told that I was too sensitive. You know, what's wrong with you? You need to toughen up. But that's who God made me to be, right? But you don't know that. I wasn't brought up in a home that honored faith, that honored religion, that honored Jesus. I was in a home that really didn't have that purpose or direction. So for me, as I got into the teen years, what do? We might rebel a little bit. Well, I rebelled a lot, right? I maintained my great education. I was always focused. I knew that I could do what I could with the books. But then the boys came along. I might get a little teary, because not only is this a story about me, it's a story about my daughter and my family, which I'll get to in a little bit, but I kind of wanted to give you some history on me. So in that, 14 years old is when I lost my virginity. And I look now and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a baby. But at that age, you didn't know that. You just wanted that boy, the cool kid on the block, to like you, to see something of worth in you, to see something of value in you. And I'd love to say that that was it, but it wasn't. Because then after that, I got into smoking a little weed, and then all of a sudden the weed wasn't enough, so I started to drink a little alcohol. So this is 14, 15, 16, 17, and then I'm supposed to go off to college. And my parents, love my parents, they didn't really know what was going on. We didn't have social media. Nobody was knowing what their kids were doing like today. Oh my gosh. Okay, that's another story there. So if everything I got was caught on camera, I don't even know. So grateful, but God saw everything. Still didn't know about God, but looking back, God had his hand on me even then.
Amen.
So I go off to college. I know that I want to study psychology, because I know that I always wanted to be a therapist, always. So I'm in school. I'm doing well, I'm staying away from the bad stuff, but again, I don't know if you guys know the Winter Park area or Rollins College, because that's where I went. My parents didn't have the money to send me to Rollins College, but they did because they knew I wanted to go. And I don't know, just nothing against the people that went there, but I didn't fit in. I didn't have a lot of money. I wasn't, not that we look at, but we do look at the outside, the appearances of people, right? And me still not having God, I didn't know that. So whatever I could do to fit in with the cool kids, I started to get into some of the heavier drugs. To me, I was invited one night, you want to go to this club, we'll just dance, it'll be fun. And that's when I was introduced to ecstasy. They call it Molly now, I think, MDMA, I don't know what all the names are they have of it. But I loved it because I could be the social butterfly. I got along. Everybody loved me. I was losing weight. Right? So we'll get to the physical part later too. Losing weight, fitting in, still going to school, living a double life. And that went on. I mean, I would say from 18, 19, that's when I kind of had my first experience, I would say, with God, because I would take, please don't say you've done this, but I did. Little nitrous oxide, they call it the Whippets, and I'd be in Publix, the grocery store, going through looking for the whipped cream to do that, and I got caught, right? I got caught. They were gonna put my picture on the little wall, like the little wall of shame. It was like a fear tactic, but I was scared, right? I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm not of this, I'm not from this. But did I learn my lesson? Nope. Right? So then all of a sudden there's a boy again. Oh, let's go to a party. So it was a continual thing of trying to battle and try to be who I am, knowing that I want to be a therapist, knowing that I love people, taking these drugs. But for me, I was able to help people, right? Because I'm not like all these people I'm seeing out at the clubs. I'm not like all these people that aren't in school. I can help them, right? They pull you down, right? And so that kind of went on for a little bit, and then I would say at the age of 21, I went to a New Year's party, and at this party, I'm ashamed to say this, but I'm gonna be real. I was gonna be real. Is that okay? No judgment? All right. So I don't even know how many pills of ecstasy I took. I would say maybe 14 pills.
Wow.
Cocaine. They had a whole, like from the dentist office, there was little nitrous oxide, the tank, I wouldn't say little, it was big, did that. That's when I started to hear things. I heard growling and gnashing of teeth. I heard a still small voice that seemed very like calm and soothing, telling me, oh, it's okay, just go to sleep. You don't have to do this anymore. So I'm just following this voice because it sounded nice. Now, all these people that were at this party that night, these people that I had been partying with for like 4 years, were showing up to this house. Did one person stop to ask me why I was outside laying on the ground going to sleep? Nope. So I believe, I'm not saying that the people were evil, but I do believe that they were all filled with demons. And for such a time as that was the time that the enemy thought he beat me. But praise the Lord, he did not.
Amen.
So as I'm laying there, now remember, I don't read the Bible, I don't know that, but I should go back a little bit and tell you I did end up in a Catholic private school in high school because I got in trouble at regular school. So I knew what the Bible was, but I just knew the 10 Commandments. And in those 10 Commandments, I was like, oh my gosh. So I remember just like thinking, okay, I remember the 10 Commandments, but like I in myself like broke the majority of them. So I'm like, I'm really going to hell. And looking back now, what I was hearing in my voice at that point, because I heard basically what sounded like an assembly, like there was a court. I didn't know what that meant at the time, now I do. And I believe that it was Satan, God the Father, and Satan was telling God the Father, oh, this one's worthless. Look, she doesn't care. She did all these drugs. She's not doing anything with this life you gave her. But then a third voice came in. Now I know that was Jesus. And he said, Father, this one, give me 1 year. I want to prune those branches. I want to show her the value that she has in me. And 1 year from now, let's come back and revisit this. So I got up off that ground. I started wandering. And I don't know, John Young in Americana.
No.
In a little party dress from the night before, no shoes on, broad daylight, right? Okay. So I went into a McDonald's asking for help. They said, no, we can't help you. They shut me out. And then it used to be Eckerd Drugs. Now I guess it's CVS. It was a little while ago. I'm a little older than 21 now. So anyways, I ended up there. And so I'm just sitting there, and they would not help me either. And I just remember going outside and crying out, God, if you're real, you need to prove this to me. And all of a sudden, somebody showed up that I had been partying with the night before, picked me up in my car. I don't know how he had my car. He went over to that house, went in for me, got my shoes, brought me back to my apartment. I walk into my apartment and it smelled like fire. Like literally like fire. And I saw drugs everywhere. And I threw all those drugs away, and I was asking this guy about God. He couldn't answer that. The only one who can answer us about God? Only God.
Amen.
So I told the guy to leave, and I remember the Bible I stole from Rollins College for a religion class. Forgive me, God. But thank you for that Bible. The Bible's free, right? Okay. So I start, like I said, the 10 Commandments, right? So I start going over, and I'm looking at that, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I went 2 weeks now, right? Let me tell you, 2 weeks, not taking any drugs, not being able to sleep. Not one person from all those 4 years that I partied with called me. I'm studying, because I'm a good student, remember, always a good student. studying that Bible, looking at that Bible, like looking at all these different things, trying to figure it out, but my eyes weren't open, my heart wasn't ready because I didn't know Jesus yet. Until one day, I heard just somebody talk about Jesus, and I'm like, okay. And it wasn't like, I love you, Jesus, I give my life to you. It was more like, I was 2 weeks not sleeping, not eating, not knowing what's going on with me. Like I felt, in my mind, I felt I was in purgatory because I was basically the balance, the scales were not in my favor. And I was just like, you need to prove it to me. I'm tired of this. I don't know what this is, but Jesus, I'm going to trust that you're the Son of God, and I'm going to believe that you can do this. And I felt, honestly, in that moment when I surrendered out of frustration and I had no other option, I felt a heat come over me better than any high I'd ever had, 21 years old. And in that moment, he just took all that away. I never went to rehab. I've been following the Lord since. Trying to dedicate. All those people never reached out to say, what happened to you? So those weren't my friends. It's like he put a hedge of protection around me.
Thank you,
all
Lord.
that, right? So great story, right? You think it would end there. Okay, so 21. So then I'm like, I still had the desire to be loved, right? So I started working at an organization and just doing like business to business telephone marketing because I'm good at talking, I'm good at connecting. And that's where I met my soon-to-be husband. And he said, you're the kind of girl that you take home to your parents. I thought, wow, nobody's ever said that to me. So I didn't realize, I didn't really know, I didn't seek God to say, is this the man you really want me to marry, right? So I say that only to explain that he had mental illness. So here we go. Bipolar. As soon as we were engaged, even prior to getting married, he was in and out of the hospital for, suicidal thoughts. And then I learned the scratches on his wrists were because he had tried to kill himself before, but that was always a secret. His parents never talked about it. But remember, I can save everybody, right? Because I'm a believer now in Jesus, and I'm a good student, and I got my degree in psychology. I've got this because I also wanted to be loved. Well, it was a rough, we were married for 9 years. We ended up having 2 children together, beautiful children. But I would say that Christmas, and something about Christmas and New Year's is very interesting with me and God. But Christmas Eve, my husband at the time, my kids were 3 and 6, he ended up completing suicide. When I got the news, I was down in South Florida visiting my parents. I have these little kids there that have no idea. And I'm like, I can't tell them this. So I had to hold it in, because that's what we do, right? We stuff it. Everything's great. Merry Christmas. Did not tell my kids what happened. Drove all the way up here with my dad and my brother-in-law to go to the hospital. Well, I should say he hadn't fully completed yet. So he was in the hospital. He had been airlifted. I had been called by a friend in the most horrific way. First he tried pills. Then he tried cutting his wrist. I found all this after because I also saw that you can go online and learn how to kill yourself. So those that are struggling with mental illness, a lot of the mental illness, I believe, is also demonic. And will guide you right to hearing all about how the evil, everything, just do this, it'll be simple, it'll be easy. But he tried to also do carbon monoxide poisoning, and ultimately he ingested gasoline and lit himself on fire in my home. While my kids and I were down in South Florida getting prepared to celebrate Christmas, and he couldn't come with us because he had already taken so much time off of work from being in the hospital so often. So I came up, I did not go in to see him. My brother-in-law went in to see him. I went and I visited his parents. His mom had a heart attack when she heard the news. She was in the hospital. And so I just had to pull it all together, get everything together, go back down to South Florida, and still pretend like everything was fine for my kids because I wanted them to have a great Christmas. So I waited until the day after Christmas to tell my kids. Not that it was suicide, and again, looking back, hindsight, maybe I could have been more honest with them. I just said that, he had depression and God gives the breath of life, and God decided it was time to take that breath of life back. So that's how I explained it to my 3-year-old and 6-year-old. 6-year-old's my daughter, Kaylee, 3-year-old, my son, Aiden. So that should be enough, right, to deal with that? You'd think. I'm like, okay, God. Now, in that moment, I was going to get my master's degree because you can't really do licensed therapy as a therapist until you have your master's degree. So I'd already been starting that. But after now, I'm a widow, and I've got these young kids I have no idea. I'm working for a company. You know, how am I supposed to take care of my kids and do this? And my husband's gone. I'm still not grieving because you know what? We're tough. We women are tough. We can handle stuff. We're resilient. So we're not going to let a dead husband committing suicide rock our boat. That's my thought because, you know, I have to take care of them. Well, how do you think that went? Not so good. Because here I am again, still searching for love, even though God's right there saying, I love you. I was longing for that connection and for that man to love me. And I wanted my kids to have a father. So I'd love to say I waited and I just trusted God and God was my husband. I got remarried within the year. Everything seemed to be good. Everything was fine. We thought it was kind of cool that he has a daughter named Kaylee and I have a daughter named Kaylee. So step families, I don't know, anybody here part of a blended family? So, okay. It's not the Brady Bunch. I thought it was the Brady Bunch because, you know, here I am, rainbows, unicorns, smiles. Even after all this happened, everything's fine, everything's fine. So I'm like, I can do this, I've got this, I'm going to master this. God, help me. Well, no, that didn't quite work out that way. So obviously I wasn't the mom to his two kids that were older. They did not like me. I was not trying to replace their mom. Their mom was still in the picture. My kid's dad was not still in the picture. So basically their father, my new husband, was their father, which my kids called him dad until his kids were saying, well, that's not fair. That, you know, they're not your dad. And so at that moment, I look back and I think that was one of the other major wounds that happened to me and my kids is I don't remember how it happened. I don't believe I ever would have said it, but my kids were then made to believe this is your stepdad, not your dad. Call him Sean. So they stopped calling him dad, and they were young. So there's a lot of woundedness right there, okay? Should be it, right? I've got enough skills, everything's good, I'm doing my master's program. God, I've got it. He's given me enough life skills for my whole life. I don't need any more. No, okay. Well, my daughter, let's get back to my daughter, because she and I genuinely, like peas in a pod. I should have brought a picture. I can share one later, but we truly do. Miranda's seen pictures. She never got to meet her, but those that knew Kaylee, she and I were like attached at the hip. Beautiful soul, also very intelligent. In high school, ended up with like a 4.9, but she was longing for that love of a man. She was longing for her father, and didn't know that God the Father could be all that for her. Even though I tried to share that with her, that woundedness that we feel, right, as women, as young girls. And she was kind of awkward, you know, did all the kind of, she never was a little overweight like me. She was always really thin, tall, a little gangly. But then all of a sudden, what happens to that gangly, tall, once they hit adolescence and puberty? Some of them turn into those butterflies and look so beautiful, right? What does the enemy like to do with those butterflies? He likes to rip those wings off. And that's what happened with my daughter. So at the age of 16, I didn't know it at the time. The boys started to pay attention. The football players started to pay attention. She was in dual enrollment, honor roll, honor society, all these things. And all of a sudden her behavior changed dramatically. And I thought, oh my gosh, she has bipolar. I'm studying mental health. We're diagnosing everybody, you know? Everybody else is diagnosing. My daughter has bipolar, her dad had bipolar, oh my gosh. So what do we do when we think mental illness? Therapy. So therapy, all that, even though I'm a therapist, you can't do it in your own home. So medication. No, I'm not saying medication can't be a good thing, but I just look at all these medications that they put my daughter on thinking that she is bipolar and broken. Yeah, she was broken, but she needed Jesus. She didn't need 6 to 8 different type of psychotropic medications that messes with your head. That's straight from the devil. Again. Right? So, but it wasn't getting through. I didn't know who this girl was. I still didn't know what had happened to her. Although, I guess, isn't it enough that her dad committed suicide or died? She knew at this point at 16 because she was just starting to be really depressed herself. And I'd get calls from teachers and they'd say, she keeps saying she wants to die. So I'm like, I need to talk with her about this. You can't be saying that. And I shared the truth. I did not share all the truth. They did not need to hear that he lit himself on fire. But I did talk about the pills. I did talk about his prior attempts that had nothing to do with them, about why he did what he did, that he loved them. But for a young teenage girl, you know, she thought, why wasn't I enough? Don't we all think that? Why am I not enough? And so for her, longing for that male attention, she was sexually assaulted on campus at her school. Not once, but multiple times. And one guy, one of the football players, took a video And she didn't know and airdropped it to the entire school. So with that, she was teased, again, bullied, remember the bullying? And she was tough though, she's my tough girl, just like her mom is tough, and tried to like go through that. I ended up pulling her out of that school to put her in Pace Center for Troubled Girls. And she did very well there, but again, the teacher's like, she doesn't belong here. She's so, I'm like, yeah, but she's wounded, she needs help. None of the therapy was working. You know, when there's that deep, she needed Jesus. And again, you can't be preaching, you can try, you can lead, you can guide, but I'm like, God, I am presenting Jesus to all these people, you're using me to work in their lives. Why can't you send someone for my daughter? You know, and so I'm like, why? So I was getting a little frustrated with God for that. But again, he's like, Abby, her story's not your story. You know, and then, so let's not forget I've got a son now, right? So he's 3 years younger. While this is going on with his sister, we've got police being called to the house because she's acting erratically, getting arrested for stupid stuff, all because of that woundedness. So my son's watching this. So my son starts using, and I didn't know, because he's coping. So he's smoking marijuana, right? And again, remember we talked about the social media, if I had done all the things that I had done and got caught. Well now, here's mom. Now I'm one of those moms, I call it helicopter, whatever you want to call it. I'm looking in their phones. That's how I found out the majority of stuff going on with my kids, seeing it on social media. So I'm heartbroken that my son is like playing around with guns with these older kids, smoking weed, coping because of watching what his sister's going through. And him now knowing that his dad also had committed suicide. And if that wasn't enough, let's flash forward a few years. Like, so now my daughter is probably, she did end up graduating high school, she got all that, but still was really wounded. But she graduated high school, my son is now in that same high school, getting in trouble. She needed his help. It was COVID. So COVID was just about to start. Remember, we were all having to go through those drive-through testings. So I'm stuck in the middle of this line. I can't go anywhere. My daughter needs her social security or something. So the only one home is my son. So she needed it for work. So she calls, I say, okay, here, go in this box. All the documents are in there. I forgot that I had the death certificate for the dad in there. So my son finds the death certificate and was looking at it. And it says like death by immolation. So he's like, of course, looking that up. What is that? So he then figures out, not only did my dad commit suicide, he lit himself on fire. So for him to find out by himself while he's already in this woundedness state, his sister now is at a new job with an interview. He's calling his sister to tell her, Dad lit himself on fire. And then I'm in this little COVID line. I have no idea what's going on. So then they're calling me and like, why didn't you tell us this? So I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't. So that's what I'm saying, I'm going back to, should I have told the truth back then? But at 3 and 6, I don't think they could have handled that. So now I have this open wound, right? My daughter, who already is thinking, why wasn't I good enough for my dad to stay? Now he lit himself on fire. That messes with your head. And then my son being the one that found it, who's using these coping mechanisms of marijuana and whatever else he was getting off the street, that changes your brain. So your brain and the chemicals, all of that is changing, right? You think that's enough, right? God, I've got enough life experience, I can really help the world. Thank you, can I sit down on the bench for a moment? Nope. This is where it gets a little harder. Father God, I just pray that you would use this story to touch the lives here. Thank you for this group of women. And your Holy Spirit that gives us strength. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
So, August of last year, my son had gotten so out of control in July that we had to call the police and he had to be taken from the home. So he's away, it's just my daughter, my husband, and I. Things had not always been so good between my daughter and my now new husband, who I am still married to. But they were in a good spot, so we were getting along. It felt like, okay, we can do this. Again, my son wasn't there, but we were working on our relationship. I had no idea that my daughter had been coping and dealing with all that had happened to her, despite all the therapy, despite, all the love, me telling her about Jesus. Have you guys heard of the Perk 30s? The little blue pills laced with fentanyl. I didn't either. Now I know all about them, probably more than I ever would know about them. She had been using what she thought were Percocets for the last year. Now what's happening, which I've learned, is that these pills are pressed. Dealers press these pills. It has fentanyl and the Lord knows what else is in there. But it's not. I mean, even just taking a Percocet, I would get those when getting surgery, like oral surgery. I could not take them because it made me nauseous. But I had no idea. Looking back, I'm like, that's why she was always throwing up. That's why she was sleeping so much. That's why she always had a runny nose. So here I am, at this point, a licensed mental health counselor, working at Advent Health, like not knowing what had happened, like what's going on. I'm supposed to see this. I help other people. I recognize this in other people. How did I not see this in my daughter? And guess who I found out from? My son. He called me one night screaming and yelling, talking about a karate instructor that both of them had grown up doing martial arts with, had been in a sexual relationship with my daughter, and had given her these pills and got her started on that. So what do I do with that? Right? So I, like a crazy woman bat out of hell, literally, chasing after my daughter in the middle of the night to go find and get her away from this man's house. So I get her home and I'm telling her, we need to get into rehab, we need to change this, like all this. She's like, no, I love him. She thought that this guy loved her. She's 21 years old. He's probably, now he's 40, so 39 at the time. He didn't love her, he used her. And she wasn't the first, there were many. And I had to have that, I'm like, I gotta put you in rehab. So I did. She hated it. She was there for less than a month. So she gets out probably the 24th of October. So here we're getting to the good part. So she's home and I'm believing, okay, she's better. She's going to meetings, she's gonna be okay. But I've gotta have tough love because I haven't had boundaries. I've enabled so much. I had no idea that the day after she got out, she relapsed. She didn't want to tell me. She found some pills again. But I guess there was one point, now looking back, she got a hold of something because the guy said, I don't have any more of those pills, but I have this powder. Would you like to have this? Pure fentanyl. I didn't know. I had no idea. So October 28th, this is just this past October, she got in a car accident. It was not her fault. She was able to come home. I was there for her. Just kind of, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it, everything. We have cameras in the house because of all the chaos that had happened over the years. She went upstairs, came downstairs, heated up some food like at 3:30 in the morning, looked fine, all of that. The next morning, and here's her. So I'm like, okay, I've got my therapist appointment. So I'm gonna go to my therapist appointment, like 45 minutes away. I'm looking at her car outside. I'm like, oh, that's a mess. Sending her pictures. I'll take care of this. We'll take care of it when I get home. And all of a sudden, if you guys know what an iPhone is, you send a message, it turns blue. Well, the messages started turning green. And I'm like, okay, well maybe just her phone died. More than her phone died. So while I'm up at my therapist, who's also a minister, former addict, a man of God, licensed therapist, he uses his Bible because that's the only type of counsel I want to have, it's in the Bible. So I was telling him about the accident. I said, but at least she's okay. And I take my water bottle and I put it down. He starts reading from the book of Job to me and starts putting my name in the place of Job's name. I'm like, what is this about? I'm like, I don't want to hear about this. Who wants to hear about your name as Job? Prior to that, 2 weeks, God had led in my heart, Abby, I want you to read the book of Job again. I need you to finish the book of Job because he wanted me to see the redemption. And I'm like, okay. So I followed, I did. So here now, I didn't tell my therapist this, he's reading me Job. As soon as he closes the Bible, my phone rings. And then I'm told that my daughter is dead. So Kaylee had taken all of that fentanyl. I don't believe she did it on purpose. I believe she was tired and exhausted. I do believe that she met with God. I do believe I had a prophetic word spoken over her that he gave her a choice. So remember my experience at 21, I was 21 as well. And God said, I'm not done with you yet. I chose to stay, I fought to stay. I believe my daughter was given the same choice because she was tired. But she didn't say, I'm tired, I want to come home to Jesus yet, until God would open up her eyes and let her see your brother, because she was worried about her brother and her mom. Your brother I know he's been wild, but he's going to come back home. He's got a call in his life, and I've got him. Little did you know, he moved back in after his sister died. What about my mom? Let me show you. And that he opened up my daughter's eyes and showed her, look at all the women and the children that your mom is going to tell about your story and her story. Lives are going to be saved. And then at that point, he said, do you want to go back or do you want to come home? And then she said, I'm tired. And that's when God brought her home. The crazy thing is, I don't know about you, if you guys know how to get into an iPhone, the police say it's one of the most difficult. They can't get in. You need to have a password. You need to have like court orders, like all this stuff. I wanted to get in my daughter's phone because I felt that I knew who it would be that would have given her what happened to her. Couldn't get in. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, couldn't get in. Police couldn't get in. Finally, we're home, and then her best friend came over, and I said, let's pray about this. So we started praying, and all of a sudden numbers started coming to us. So we started writing it down. We're like, okay. So I'm looking at these numbers, and then I'm like, I don't know what these numbers are, because they weren't in order. And I said, I remember back when she was in high school, who she loved. She liked this MagCon singer. So all of a sudden, she looks up her friend looks up this MagCon, like little up and coming little bippity bop singer, and then puts in, I said, try his date of birth. Puts in the date of birth, and I didn't know. She goes over to my daughter's phone on the first attempt, gets into the phone. And while we saw that, the last song that she was listening to, because my husband found her, by the way. That morning while I was away, he had gone in because I said, you need to go wake her up because her phone's going to green. And he found her, and he said she looked at peace. She looked asleep. She had her little AirPods in, just resting. So the last song I was able to access she listened to was Tired by Kelly Price. And so that was in line with what that prophetic word I got, that she said, I'm tired. So I know that she's with him. I share all that to explain, how the heck am I supposed to go and still be a mental health counselor after all this? I'll tell you how, by the grace of God. That's why I'm standing. So I share all that to say to you guys, I would never choose any of these things, but I'm grateful that God has allowed me to endure them and then give me opportunity. So I'm so blessed to have you invite me here, and blessed to know Hermanda and Angela, all my new friends, and Mom, to be here, to be able to share this with you, because you can't judge somebody by how they look on the outside. We all have stuff that we're going through. And yes, I'm a proponent of therapy and making sure if we need meditation to do that, but I'm also a big proponent of that balance. We need to take care of the body that Christ has given us and that He lives inside. And we also need to make sure that we have Jesus, because that's the only healer. There's no healing outside of Him. So I'm so grateful and blessed to be here standing with you and being able to say, I'm still standing and the enemy is not knocking me down.
Praise the Lord.